Oh, Phoebe Rizzo talking to the void once again, and this is definitely a void talking one. I love a good Nicolas Cage freakout. I do. There's just something about him when he goes off the rails and is completely off the leash. Nothing like it. So, Color Out of Space. The most recent Lovecraft adaptation, and actually one of the better ones. So, this one, a meteorite crashes down on the Gardner farm, and strange things start happening. Odd colored flowers begin growing, a radiance at night that doesn't seem to match most of the spectrum, and animals that seem a little bit less. Well, they get a little weirdly mutated over the course. And as people's perceptions go out the window and their behavior becomes increasingly erratic, all hell breaks loose. Okay, so being an adaptation of the H.P. Lovecraft story by the similar name, just the different spelling of color, it does a very good job in keeping to the source material, actually, which is rather difficult to do with a Lovecraft anything, given how unfilmable a lot of his works tend to be. So they did change a few things with this. They, or one, set it in the modern day, which was, I think, a good choice. It really shows that the story could still happen and kind of fits seamlessly in and almost anywhere. And they did do a considerable amount of name updating. Particularly, the main character that Nicolas Cage plays becomes Nathan Gardner instead of Nahum Gardner. You don't see a lot of Nahums these days. Um, then most of the cast is largely the same as in the book, but the storytelling is broken up a little bit. So in the original book, it's pretty much all told in flashback as a unnamed hydrologist comes up to get the story of what happened to cause this area to become so, well, off, and talks to an old man named Ammi Pierce, who relates a story about what happened to his neighbors, the gardeners. Now this one, they're still the hydrologist, but he's actually going to the property as the events are happening, and he's not talking to the neighbors, he's off and on discussing things with the gardeners themselves, particularly the then Nathan's daughter, Lavinia, which is another name stolen right out of a different Lovecraft story, The Dunwich Horror, which will be interesting since this director has indicated he wants to do The Dunwich Horror next, so I don't know if they're going to use the same name or just switch it up a little bit. I'm not sure. Now, in the original book, the hydrologist was unnamed. In this one, they went with Ward Phillips, which is a name that appears in many Lovecraftian things as a insert character for Lovecraft himself. How Ward Phillips Lovecraft. Ha. But it works as a outsider who is viewing the strange things without being completely directly impacted by them. So the character for Ammi Pierce is completely gone. They keep the Gardner family largely the same, except for instead of 3 sons, he has 2 sons and a daughter. And you see a lot more things directly as they're happening rather than the aftermaths, which are more what were witnessed in the book. A lot of the same things are happening. The strange vegetation, the strange animals, the inability for the family to leave as things just keep... They pretty much have lost the ability to even consider leaving. So it plays out very similar to the events of the book, just with the modern update and a few just minor tweaks. They also introduced the character of, I think they called him Ezra, as a hermit out in the woods who he wasn't really, I believe, in the original story at all, but he could fit into pretty much any Lovecraft related thing. He kind of takes like the Zadok Allen kind of role from Shadow over Innsmouth as the drunk, or in this case, high person who's like swearing that strange things are going on, man. So he was an interesting character, but did seem a little extra and didn't really add too much. And the film was already almost 2 hours, so he could have been cut without really impacting much. So the special effects of this one, I rate very highly, and there's some imagery that's straight out of The Thing. I believe they used some practical effects in regards to the scenes, and so regarding some of the monsters, but a lot of it was CG, but not terrible, and they don't stare at it directly, with the exception of the floating color itself. But it's a color. What else are you gonna do? So they did a good job in that regard. I will say this movie does have a considerable high degree per capita of alpaca than the original story, and while there's some odd alpaca-related humor here and there, it doesn't really detract, and if anything, just adds to kind of the oddness of things that are going on. Nick Cage is in rare form. I haven't seen him this animated in a while, but admittedly, I haven't seen his other recent one, Mandy, which I heard is also him being very Nick Cage. So he was kind of the standout of this one, particularly as he goes from 0 to 100 to back down, up and down again, as he has violent mood swings throughout it. But while some of it does seem to come out of nowhere, it does fit in with the what the color seems to be doing to him mentally. Overall, I do really enjoy this film. I've seen a lot of Lovecraft adaptations, and with the exception of the ones done by the HVL Society, most of them are not very good. This one definitely is a standout, and it goes all in on it, and I actually really did enjoy it. It captured the original story very well, and it was enjoyable to sit through. I was getting pretty connected to some of the characters, particularly Lavinia, and was really hoping things would work out for some of them. Um, so this one I'm gonna rate very highly. This one is for me getting a 5 out of 5 MacGuffins, but I do have a soft spot for Lovecraft, so that is a little bit of my bias creeping in there. But overall, Lovecraft, Nick Cage, it's a match made in heaven, really. So definitely check this one out if you get a chance to. I know it's not didn't receive a very wide release, and I haven't seen much of it as a DVD release yet. Right now, I know it's treated as a Shudder exclusive, I believe, though I think it might be on Amazon Prime also, but I'm not completely sure on that one. But see this one if you get the chance, particularly if you're into Lovecraftian things at all. Highly recommend.